The knock at the door was tentative, almost hesitant. I knew exactly who it was before I even opened it, my parents, and, to my surprise, a few of the neighbors who had spent years whispering about me behind their fences. They arrived expecting a modest little farm, a struggling woman, a story that confirmed their long-held assumptions. Instead, they were met with a smell of polished wood, the faint tang of fresh produce in the air, and the rhythmic hum of machinery moving crates of vegetables into waiting delivery trucks. I opened the door slowly, letting them take in the scene. My office, part of the original farmhouse, but expanded into a sleek, modern command center, gleamed with stainless steel counters, neatly stacked paperwork, and framed photos of successful harvests. A large map of the Midwest hung on the wall, pins marking every city and town where my produce had been delivered. The sunlight streaming through the windows made the glass of my certificates and awards glint like jewels. They stepped inside hesitantly, their expressions a mix of confusion and disbelief. I gestured for them to sit at the long wooden table. "I thought you'd like a tour," I said lightly, my voice calm but carrying a weight they couldn't ignore. As they walked, they noticed the upgraded greenhouses, the refrigerated storage units humming quietly in the background, and the fleet of trucks lined up outside, each branded with the farm's logo. Their eyes widened, and I saw the recognition slowly dawn on them. They had assumed this was just a quaint, struggling farm, yet here was a thriving enterprise supplying dozens of stores, restaurants, and farmers' markets across the state. Finally, we returned to the office. I sat down gracefully, placing my hands over the polished oak table. "I know what you expected," I began, letting the silence stretch for a heartbeat before I spoke again. "You thought I couldn't do it, that my dreams were childish, that I would fail." I watched their faces, noting the flickers of shame, embarrassment, and curiosity. Well, I didn't fail. In fact, I've grown beyond what any of you imagined. This farm, once laughed at, now supplies the nation. I oversee everything: production, distribution, contracts. And yes, I added, a small, controlled smile curling my lips, I did it all on my own. Their reactions were immediate and visceral. My father's mouth fell open. My mother's hands clutched each other nervously. The neighbors shifted uneasily, glancing at one another in disbelief. Some of them tried to speak, but the words caught somewhere between awe and shame. They hadn't just underestimated the farm, they had underestimated me. I let them absorb the truth, letting the magnitude of my accomplishments settle in the room like the aroma of fresh-baked bread. I could see the realization hit them, the mix of regret and admiration forming slowly across their faces. Their silence was louder than any applause. They were forced to confront their own assumptions and ridicule, and all they could do was witness the proof of their misjudgment. I leaned back slightly, letting the weight of my success fill the space between us. "This is what happens," I said softly but firmly, "when someone refuses to let mockery define them." And in that moment, I realized the power wasn't just in the farm or the wealth or the national contracts. It was in the quiet, relentless determination that had carried me here. They had mocked me once. Now, there was no denying who I had become. The room was thick with tension, but I felt calm, grounded. For years, I had carried the sting of their laughter, the whispers, the doubts. Now, the power had shifted. I was no longer the girl they underestimated. I was the woman who had transformed that tiny, mocked farm into a business that supplied the nation. And with that power came choice. I could punish them with silence, let them stew in guilt, or I could extend an olive branch, but on my terms. I leaned forward, hands clasped on the polished oak table, and met their eyes one by one. "I can help," I began, my voice steady, "but not without conditions." My parents flinched slightly, and I allowed a small, knowing smile. "First, Dad, you need to let go of your skepticism. Your constant doubt wasn't just discouraging, it almost held me back. I want honesty from now on. Support me or step aside." My mother's eyes widened, and I continued, "Mom, you've spent too long prioritizing appearances over growth. I want to see genuine encouragement, helping me where you can, not questioning every decision. Toxic habits and fear of failure won't be part of this family dynamic anymore. Then I turned to the neighbors. To everyone here, I said, voice softening but firm, mockery and gossip will not be tolerated. If you want to be part of this community, you need to contribute positively. Support local businesses, learn from them, and respect hard work. I refuse to allow petty judgments to poison progress again. Each condition tied to self-growth, not revenge. I wasn't here to humiliate anyone further. I was here to reshape the dynamic that had long stifled me, and others like me. Compassion and firmness blended naturally, a balance I had learned over years of quiet struggle and relentless determination. They nodded slowly, the weight of realization sinking in. Some faces softened, some stiffened with embarrassment, but all understood the shift. I was no longer just a daughter, a neighbor, or someone they could dismiss. I was a leader, an entrepreneur, a force they could no longer ignore. I added one final stipulation, almost whispering it. If you truly want to be involved, you must commit to growth, your own. Pursue your passions, take responsibility, and let your actions reflect integrity. Anything less is wasted energy. There was silence again, but this time it was different, respectful, cautious, tinged with gratitude. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of alignment, a recognition that the power I had worked for wasn't just about money or recognition. It was about shaping the world around me while preserving my own values. I leaned back in my chair, watching as they absorbed the gravity of my words. This was more than a power shift. It was a realignment of relationships, priorities, and respect. I had not sought revenge. I had sought justice, clarity, and the kind of accountability that only comes from standing firmly in one's truth. And as the first nods of acknowledgement and tentative smiles appeared, I realized something profound. I was no longer reacting to the world. I was defining it on my terms. The weeks that followed were quieter, but not without movement. My parents began to shift subtly, letting go of old doubts and embracing a new rhythm of support. My father helped with logistics, once reluctantly, now with a sense of pride that made my chest ache with warmth. My mother, too, started learning about crop rotations and supply schedules, offering suggestions that actually improved efficiency. The neighbors began to engage differently, asking questions, volunteering help, and slowly replacing judgment with genuine curiosity. I walked through the greenhouses one morning, the smell of moist soil and growing produce filling my senses, and thought back to that leather-bound notebook my grandmother had pressed into my hands so many years ago. Every line, every scribbled tip had guided me more than anyone could have imagined. I held it now, worn and fragile, tracing her handwriting with a reverence I hadn't felt in years. Dreams planted with care grow stronger than the weeds of doubt, I whispered to myself. And indeed, it had. There was a sense of calm authority in my routine now. I could glance at the deliveries being packed, the trucks lined up in perfect order, the team moving efficiently, and smile, knowing that what I had built was more than a farm. It was a testament to resilience, vision, and perseverance. More importantly, it was a living example to everyone who had doubted me. Success does not come to those who wait for permission. It comes to those who refuse to surrender to ridicule. That afternoon, I paused by the edge of the field, watching the sun slant across rows of flourishing crops. The wind carried the faint scent of earth and new growth, and for a moment, the years of struggle, heartache, and quiet labor felt like a distant memory, softened by accomplishment. I realized that the relationships I now valued were those built on mutual respect, honesty, and shared purpose. I had transformed not only the farm, but the connections around me. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, letting the warmth of the sun and the satisfaction of hard-won victories wash over me. The notebook lay beside me, a symbol of the journey, the wisdom, and the unwavering encouragement that had carried me through. Opening my eyes, I looked at the horizon, where endless fields stretched toward the sky, a nation now nourished by my labor. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that no amount of mockery, doubt, or ridicule could ever diminish the woman I had become. I did it. I murmured softly, a quiet affirmation to myself and to everyone who had once doubted me. I grew it all, from the soil beneath my hands to the nation that now depends on it.